I'm Lior Phillips, host of This Must Be the Gig. We're a weekly podcast that documents everything about the world of live music, speaking with choreographers, costume and set designers, the people who run beloved venues and festivals, and, of course, speaking with musicians about that one gig that changed their lives. Get your peek behind the curtain at consequenceofsound.net, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Consequence Podcast Network.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with, an audio interview series presented by WFPK Independent Louisville at WFPK.org. Consequence of Sound and the Consequence Podcast Network, wherever you're listening from right now. Take a moment, hopefully, to hit the subscribe button to keep up with this series, as we do release 3 interviews a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And we'd love to keep you up to date. Of course, you can subscribe anywhere you get your favorite podcasts from, like iTunes and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or even YouTube. I'm Kyle Meredith. Today, my guest, Robin Wilson of the band Gin Blossoms. Last year, they released an album, their first one in 8 years, called Mixed Reality, which we'll talk about how teaming up with Don Dixon and Mitch Easter gave them that great jingle feel that the duo is known for, especially with REM. There's a lot of REM worship in this interview. I'll give you the spoiler that it begins and ends with some REM worship. We'll also talk about a few of the songs specifically. One of the songs, Face in the Dark, was written about one of the founders, Doug Hopkins, who passed away in 1993. And Robin will tell me about writing that song right there. That also leads into their recent playings of the album New Miserable Experience. That was their breakthrough record, and they would play it in full in the last couple of years. We'll hear about his relationships with those songs, as well as the 30th anniversary of the first Gin Blossoms record before they were signed to a major label. It was called Dusted. And speaking of anniversaries, when we recorded this, it was the 25th anniversary of the Kiss tribute album called Kiss My Ass. And Robin's got some great Kiss stories. He fronted Kiss! Actually fronted Kiss! And speaking of fronting, these days, along with the Gin Blossoms, he also fronts the Smithereens. And Robin tells me, not only is there new Gin Blossoms music in the works, but there's possibly a new Smithereens album in the works. There's lots happening in this one. It's Kyle Meredith with the Gin Blossoms.
Hello, this is Robin.
Well, first off, it is really a pleasure, really an honor, really. You know, your all songs have meant the world to me, so it's great to hear everybody's still out there and performing at the level you did. You all were just, are you still on tour with Collective Soul? Is that still happening?
Well, we're taking a break from them, and then we start up with them again and do another 15 shows starting at the end of July.
I just had Ed on the show, I think last week and everything, so I got to hear, the beginning of it, his side of it. What are there any standout moments so far?
Well, every night I get to go up on stage with Collective Soul and sing The One I Love by REM.
And that's a big thing because you're a big REM fan. You and I have that in common. This is a lifelong fandom of your own, right?
Absolutely. It's a great song. It's always been a big one in my canon, and fronting another rock band other than mine is always fun. You get to step in and you get all the glory with none of the baggage.
The REM connection, I feel like that's an easy seg because last year you put out the really great record called Mixed Reality, and it has a tie-in there as you used producers Don Dixon and Mitch Easter. With this record, you all have always had sort of that vibe, and I'm going to use the word jangle that's kind of been in and out of your career through your catalog, but this one does feel it has more of a stake in that, and I didn't know if that came naturally for you or if that's some of the influence that Don and Mitch had on you.
Well, I think it wasn't the parts were already written before we got into the studio, but I can say for certain that as I was writing and arranging these songs, I had Don and Mitch's catalog very much in my thoughts, and I felt like I was able to reconnect with my 20-year-old self and write songs that kid would have wanted to present to the band. So, especially with one of my songs, Face the Dark, I knew as soon as that was written, and it was actually the basics of it were written a few years before I even knew that Don might be in the picture, but I always sort of pictured that song as as an early Jim Blossom song that was heavily influenced by REM and the Church and some of the other touchstones that inspired Jim Blossom.
Now, looking back like that, I mean, writers a lot of time you sort of look for a direction or inspiration to kind of, spur the creativity. Why look back? Why was this the moment to try to reconnect with that 20-year-old self?
Well, there's nothing I did like on purpose. It's just kind of what happened, I just started writing songs, and as soon as they started to come together, I sensed that that's what was happening. I didn't sit down ahead of time and think, okay, I'm going to write some REM, Smithereens kind of tunes, something that Jim Blossoms would have wanted to do in 1990. It just started happening all on its own, and I was quick to realize that it was happening, and I didn't fight it. I just do what comes naturally to me, and I was just fortunate that I was in a really strong place creatively, and I was very confident as I was writing the songs that I was on to something.
You hear some of that, of course. The album leads off with Break, and I know Forever is the Nights, one of yours, and both great. There's also the lighter side of things that I wanted to hear about, because you get the JFK Shit Show, a very short song. I don't know how that happened, but it leads right into that first line of The Devil's Daughter, and that seems like there was some intelligent thought going on there.
As we were sequencing the record, it became sort of obvious that that's where those should go. But, mainly I wanted Don Dixon to sequence the album, and I came to him with basically two ideas. I thought the record should start with Break, and I thought it should end with Mega Pawn King. And then I let Don kind of take it from there. And then we had one or two more conversations, and I think there was a moment where I said, why don't we put JFK right before The Devil's Daughter? And, just a few moments of whimsy kind of jammed together. Seemed like the right thing to do.
What is that moment that we're hearing with the JFK?
Well, I live on Long Island in New York, and I fly out of JFK every week, and it's the bane of my existence. I think the place should just be nuked, and they should just start over again. It's just such a colossal fuck up of chaos. It's just such a mess. And I was sitting on the plane. Usually what happens when you're at JFK, there's so many planes, it's so busy that when your plane lands, there's nowhere for you to park, or they can't find a ground crew to come and, park the plane. And so you end up sitting there on the runway for an extra 20 minutes while the airport finds a parking space for you. And this happens so often. And, this was about 4 years ago when I wrote the song. I was just sitting there in my seat, just aggravated and just so sick of my JFK experience. And I just, in my head, started singing that tune. And by the time we managed to park the plane, I kind of had the whole thing. And I went home and I sang it to my son right away. I'm like, great, check this out. I wrote a song on a plane. And, he kind of laughed. And then later that day, I heard him bragging to my sister-in-law or his aunt. Dad wrote a really funny song called the JFK Shit Show, and I think he was mostly telling her about it so he had an opportunity to curse.
Right. I have a son who does that same thing. So, yeah. It is a fun moment. I hadn't been paying attention, I think, to the track list when I had the record on. So when I got to there, it was definitely one of those moments where I turned around and went, hey, wait, what now is going on?
Yeah. And, I was always – Queen is one of my favorite bands. And A Night at the Opera was the first record I ever bought. And there's a song on that record, Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon. And, so I wanted – I was kind of inspired by that. As I was writing the song on the plane, I kind of realized, this is like, Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon by Queen. And so I wanted it to be like a, old ragtime number.
Well, that's a lighter side. You had mentioned Face in the Dark earlier, and as I read, that started out about one thing, but you've said is also a bit about Doug.
Yeah, I originally was writing the song about the end of my marriage, but, as I was writing the lyrics, I started thinking about Doug, and I realized that it applied to him, to his relationship, or to him, to my and Doug's relationship, and to his final days, his last couple years before his death. I think that's how he was feeling.
Well, no, in the last couple of years, you all had been playing New Miserable Experience in full in concert. For what seems like, what was a complicated time in your life, what's your relationship like with those songs nowadays?
It's pretty warm, and pretty fond. I'm asked all the time, do I mind singing the hits? And no, I don't. I enjoy it quite a bit, and I'm really proud of, that we've had hits and we have a legacy. And when we started doing New Miserable Experience live back in 2017 to celebrate the 25th anniversary, I was forced for the first time in 25 years to actually listen to the record. And I heard it with an objectivity that I never could have in previous times. I knew the material, but I hadn't thought about it as a body of work, or I hadn't thought about it in terms of what it must sound like to other people. And I realized that it's really fucking great. So, playing that, when our crew heard us do it for the first time, they were like, they had heard most of those songs before, but they hadn't realized that they were all from the same record.
Right.
And so even our crew was like, holy crap, this is all on one album? And we're like, yeah, we're pretty fucking good,
Has it occurred yet that this is the 30th anniversary of your first record with Dusted?
I guess I hadn't thought about it I haven't thought about Dusted in a while, but it's never lost on me that the band has been together for 31 years.
Yeah.
It comes up in conversation quite a bit, and people ask, I'll meet a cab driver or whatever, and they're like, oh, you're in a band? How long you been together? And you say 31 years, and people go, holy crap. That's a long time. It truly is. It's quite an accomplishment, and ultimately, it's the brass ring. It's what you hope for, to be able to sustain it and to have a catalog of music that's familiar to people and a part of their lives. And I just take so much pride in being a rock singer and what we've accomplished, and it's just an amazing thrill to be able to go to any city in America and have 1,000 people sing our songs back to us. Something I wrote in my bedroom, and there's 1,000 people singing it back to me. There's really as a guy who grew up wanting to be a rock singer and a songwriter, it's the ultimate reward.
Well, I wanted to ask a couple things about that album. So that's one of them I'd always heard about and never took the time to track down. But, of course, for the interview, I wanted to hear it. Talking about Dusted, and was blown away because, you all got better, as bands do, with time. But it's interesting to hear how well you were formed right out of the gate with that record. I mean, those songs, it's interesting to hear the 90s stripped off of those songs. But those songs almost sound like what you do now, like with what we're hearing with Mixed Reality. It's almost like a full circle,
It is. Again, we've always done what comes naturally to us. We've always followed our influences, and never was there a moment where some new thing was happening on MTV and we were like, oh, let's dress like that, or let's write a song like that. We always just followed our course, what came to us naturally. And I think it's that kind of honesty that people connect with. That kind of authenticity is what people crave from their music.
Yeah.
And they can feel it.
You all have done deluxe editions. Have you ever thought about reissuing that album?
Dusted, well, we've got it available. We've printed up some CDs, but the fact is nobody buys CDs anymore. We've barely sold we've hardly sold any Mixed Reality. People stream the crap out of it, but people don't really buy it. And it's just a different time. That's the thing that's changed the most about the music industry since the beginning of our career is the delivery mechanism. I think people connect with music in exactly the same kind of ways emotionally as they ever did. It's just a different delivery system.
Right.
And, we came up in a time where you listened to the radio, you watched MTV, you went to the record store. Consuming music was something you did, that you set time aside for. And now it's just everywhere. Every song ever written is available at any given time in your pocket. And, that's, I think, the main thing that's different. But people, I think, still connect to music and have exactly the same emotional responses that they ever did. I'm not one of those people that says, the kids today, they suck because they didn't get to go to record stores, or, our high school sucks since we graduated. People don't really change, Again, when it comes to music, it's just the delivery system that's changed.
Well, I'd mentioned anniversary. I was going to mention one more, too, and I just realized this one a few minutes before the interview. You'd put out an EP 25 years ago this year called Shut Up and Smoke, and it had some, I guess, B-sides in it, and Soul Deep ended up on the Speed soundtrack. Christine 16, it wasn't on that one. You had Christine Irene, but Christine 16, the anniversary for that Kiss compilation, Kiss My Ass, was actually today. Today is the 25th anniversary of that compilation.
That's amazing. It's funny. I just watched the video for us, performing that on Letterman with Kiss. I was just watching that last night because yesterday I got a tattoo from one of my favorite tattoo artists, a pretty famous dude named Dan Smith. I just posted some photos on our Instagram of me getting this tattoo yesterday. And Dan is a rock and roller. He's in a band called Sharp Shock. So anytime I get a tattoo from Dan, we talk about our bands and we talk about our influences and stuff. And so we were I'm lying there getting the tattoo, and on the stereo, Kiss started playing on the Spotify playlist that he had going. And so as he was giving me the tattoo, I looked up and I said, "Hey, did I ever tell you about the time that I fronted Kiss on Letterman?" And he was like, "Holy shit, no." And so, when I got to my hotel that night, I sent him the link to that video, and I watched it like a couple of times, and I was like, "Holy crap, man! I really did that."
You fronted Kiss? Huh? What was that? So what's the story there? I mean, what was that? I'm guessing that was to promote this compilation, but yeah. I mean, did you have any zany Kiss moment that went along with that?
There were a few, actually. My favorite moment is, you don't see it in the video, but during the solo, Gene and Paul flanked me and started doing that coordinated rocking back and forth thing that they do. Uh-huh. And they're so tall, so I was standing in between the two of them, and I literally had to look straight up to see both of their faces. It was this moment where I was in Kiss, and that was literally what I dreamed of. No shit, deep, real REM sleep dreams. When I was in the 6th grade, I would dream about being in Kiss. And so to be able to grow up and have that actually come true for a moment was incredible. I've been able to have a few moments like that over the course of our career. And again, I look back sometimes and I just can't believe that all of this has really happened. And literally my 3rd grade dream of being a rock singer came true.
Speaking of fronting other bands, you also help out with the Smithereens these days and front those. Are there going to be more of those dates and activity on the way?
Yeah, actually, they're being inducted into the New Jersey Hall of Fame sometime this fall, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be there to front the Smithereens as they're inducted. And then I'd like to do more shows with them next year than I got to do this year. And on top of that, we're talking about making a record. And Jim Babjack, the guitar player, Jim and I just started writing some songs together. So he sent me 4 ideas, and I've started writing lyrics. So, yeah, go figure. I'm in the Smithereens.
Wow. That's really exciting news, every bit of that. Yeah. I hope that doesn't take too long to come to fruition. I'll definitely be looking forward to it.
It will take a long fucking time.
Everything does.
Yeah, because I'm also hoping to make a Jim Blossom's record again next year. So, there's a lot of work to do. It's good stuff. I mean, what else have I got to do? But be a rock and roller. It seems like what I was put here on earth to do.
Well, maybe it's also time. You just pull the hat trick, the trifecta. Call up Gene and see if Kiss needs a new record too. So you can just knock out all 3.
There you go. Yeah, I'm waiting for REM and Queen to call, you know?
Well, I mean, Stipes, he's kind of pulled back, but the other guys look like they still want to play. So, maybe it's time.
Maybe it's time. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm qualified for that position. I could, but of course, Michael Stipe's one of the greats.
Mm-hmm.
As a rock frontman, I have to hold him up as one of the top 10 lead singer frontman in rock history, and in my personal experience, one of the say 5 most influential on my style as a performer, as a lyricist, as a singer. I don't think there's only a few that I can point to that had a bigger influence on me than Michael Stipe.
Well, I agree and feel the same way 100%. And since we've now come full circle back to what we started talking about REM at the beginning, so I feel like we've done our due diligence here, and that's a good way to wrap it up.
Okay.
Robin, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for the interview today and the phone call, and we'll see you back on the road with Collective Soul in the next leg.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed our conversation. And
all right, man. Take care.
Bye now. Thanks.
Bye. Big thanks, Robin Wilson of the Jim Blossoms. Their latest album, Mixed Reality, is out now. Hey, before you get out of here, don't forget, I hope you hit the subscribe button. iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere that you're listening from right now, you can hit the subscribe button. And if it is in the podcast land, I hope you give the series a rating and leave a review, or even just say hi and where you're listening from. After that, WFPK.org. That's where I do a show every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, where you can also find some bonus episodes of this series. ConsequenceOfSound.net has your music and film news. I'm also at Twitter at Kyle Meredith and Facebook /Kyle Meredith. And that does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.